The Monsters That Made Us is brought to you by the Cage Club Podcast Network. For all things movies, music, media, monsters, and more, head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. Today we head back to ancient times where the Scorpion King Mathayus has been tasked by King Zakor of Al-Marad with retrieving the Urn of Kings, an ancient artifact believed to hold the key to the unstoppable power of Lord Alchemon, a sorcerer who once controlled the entire known world. But when Mathayus is betrayed by his partner Drazen, who has stolen the urn and framed Mathayus for the murder of his father King Yannick, the old Scorpion King once again finds himself on the run. With the aid of some new allies, this time the beautiful Valina Raskov and her father Sorel, Mathayus must contend with some idiotic guards, a temple of gorgeous women, a pygmy tribe, a robot dragon, and more as he races to find Lord Alchemon's throne and his power before Drazen can claim it for himself and rule the world. Grab a sword and throw on your best drag outfit and join us as we discuss The Scorpion King 4: Quest for Power.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
Listen to them, children of the night.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? I'll show you who I am and what I am.
You're insane. I tell you, I killed a wolf, a plain, ordinary wolf.
By studying these and other species, we add to our knowledge of how life evolved, how it adapted itself to this world.
He went for a little walk. He could have seen his face.
Welcome to the return of The Monsters That Made Us, the podcast where we celebrate the spectacular characters and films in the Universal Studios classic monster series. Today we're talking about The Scorpion King 4: Quest for Power. I'm the invisible Dan Colon, and joining me as always is my co-host, Monster Mike Manzi.
And I'm good. I could use some alchemy and figure out how to turn these podcasts into gold.
Okay, so before we get into The Scorpion King 4, we have a couple of things we want to discuss. First, we got some pretty exciting news for September. If you've been following along with the podcast and our release schedule, you may suspect that our next episode is going to cover the 2017 Mummy, which was the beginning of the Dark Universe. And we will be joining Josh Korngut, the managing editor of DreadCentral.com and the host of the Development Hell podcast, for a multi-part series on Universal's Dark Universe and everything that was planned for that series of films, including The Mummy. So we'll be talking about The Mummy over there, but we will also be releasing our own Mummy episode at the end of September. We'll be promoting all that all on our social media, so make sure you follow us there. Definitely subscribe to Development Hell if you aren't already, so you can stay up to date. And while you're there, check out Development Hell's other episodes, because Josh has been doing some really cool stuff over there. It's a really fun show, and we're super grateful to Josh for giving us the opportunity to tag along on his journey through the Dark Universe.
Yeah, I really look forward to this opportunity. Josh has been very gracious so far. We planned out some episodes in advance, and it's going to be a lot of fun because Dan can't stop thinking about the Dark Universe. Just can't. So I'm very, very excited for these episodes coming up.
Yeah, I think the plan currently is one episode a week, 4 episodes across the month of September. But again, follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to Development Hell. Everything will be released under their banner. Super excited for that.
Yep.
Also, Mike, you heard about the news. James Wan is currently in talks to produce and direct The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, I love it. The guy just can't get out of the ocean. He just loves the water. I'm a big fan of that first Aquaman film. They had some creature monsters in there. It was a fun sequence. This is encouraging news.
Yes, I read some of the coverage on this. So it would be his first film in the director's chair since his company, Atomic Monster, merged with Blumhouse. So that's exciting.
Oh, okay.
Atomic Monsters' Michael Clear and Judson Scott would executive produce, while Executive Vice President of Production Development Jay Polidoro would oversee for Universal. The project is described as a, quote, grounded, modernized retelling that leans into visceral horror whilst paying respect to the original classic, end quote.
Well, this guy is no stranger to horror, sort of redefined it in the early 2000s with Saw and all that.
And he's done it a couple times since. installments.
The Conjuring series,
Yep.
so like involved in like lots of different types of horror. I know he's a big Lovecraft fan. I've heard through following his career and stuff that he's been trying to do stuff like that. So this is sort of right up that alley. I'm very excited about this. I like this guy.
Yeah, I'm a fan of James Wan. I especially kind of really liked one of the more recent films he did,
Malignant?
Malignant. Yes. Is he the right guy for the creature from the Black Lagoon? I don't know, but I will say that the man is not afraid to take some big swings. And as I get older and the more horror movies I watch, I kind of really love films that break away from the cliches and try some new stuff. So he's definitely a guy who enjoys doing that as well. So I'm really optimistic about this project, and I hope that it goes through. I feel like with a lot of these projects, we hear, oh, this is happening, and then it gets shelved or it never comes to fruition. But
Yeah, I think they're going to look at his filmography and go horror, water. He can go big, he can go small. Meet this somewhere in the middle of all that, and I
yeah.
think you got a good chance.
Guillermo del Toro, having found
Mm.
incredible success with The Shape of Water, definitely gave studios the confidence. I think Universal is now like, okay, yeah, I think A Creature from the Black Lagoon could work now.
Yeah, that was an Oscar award-winning movie.
So it's
Yeah.
a shame that Guillermo did not get to do Creature from the
Oh,
Black Lagoon as he wanted.
he's gonna get Frankenstein. He's okay. He got what he really wanted, I think, out of all of this.
I hope so. Either way, I'm looking forward to that project as well.
Yeah, lots of
So,
fun stuff coming up in the future.
okay, so Scorpion King 4. We are
Mhm.
now 4 movies into this Scorpion King franchise. 3 of them have been straight to video, and honestly, after the third one, I kind of find myself wondering what compelled the studio to keep making more of these. Clearly, they didn't cost a lot of money. It's pretty clear on the screen that these are pretty inexpensive, but were enough people buying the DVDs to actually turn a profit? I don't really know.
It's an interesting question. I haven't really thought of it. I don't think we'll spend too much time on this per se, but like nowadays I look at the streaming services and all of the shows and original content that they have, and I'm like, where's this all going? Where is it coming? Like there's so much of it. Some of this has to just be disposable for tax purposes, right? Like we've
Oh,
learned
could
a
be.
little bit more recently that projects get the axe. They just cancel finished films, but like I think in the day they would just like release these quick things for write-offs and they're like, we got to get it in under the fiscal year, something
Sure.
like that. What could we push out? Another Scorpion King movie, sure, why not?
That's not to say that these movies don't have some element of fun. We're definitely trying to find as much to enjoy as we can for the show because we don't want to sit here for 2 hours trashing a movie. There's always something worth checking out. And I think for me, what makes some of these movies particularly fun are the cameos. Scorpion King 4 is no exception. I mean, this time we've got Rutger Hauer, Michael Biehn, Barry Bostwick, M. Emmett Walsh, Lou Ferrigno. These aren't necessarily A-list actors, but they are definitely iconic names for us genre film fans, people we have seen and loved in other films. Just getting to see them show up in this movie was really fun for me. I had a blast with each reveal.
It's Brad from Rocky Horror, right? Like what is he doing here? I don't really care, but they're gonna reference it at one point and it's fun. Like that's the Emmett Walsh, like America's greatest character actor at one point. Like what's he doing? I don't know, but he's having a blast. Like there's the thing is like the spirit of these movies is just like cut loose, have fun. Nobody's really paying attention. And sometimes that's like a positive thing, right? Like if no one's really bothering with what's going on, like you can get away with a lot of things. In the end, this might not be Scorpion King 1 or anything like that. It might not be the best thing, but there is a spirit to this film that is contagious where I was like, gotta finish it for the podcast, but like it wasn't begrudgingly or anything. I was like, all right, for what it is, again, that's like the motto, right? For what these are, it's not the worst.
For me, this one ventures so far away from the sort of sword and sandal D&D Conan adventure that I had a little bit of a tough time sticking with it. It leans so heavily into the comedy, and we'll get into why that is or why I think that is. Tonally, it feels very separate from the previous installments. I don't think I was able to get through this from start to finish in one sitting. I mean, part of that has to do with my busy schedule. A lot of times I'll watch these in pieces, but I found myself like, okay, I still have another hour of this. Let me walk away for a bit and come back and try to finish it. So like getting through, it's almost 2 hours long. I found myself struggling because, I mean, it's not a strong movie overall, but I found that the tonal shift made it a little more challenging to make it to the end.
I see that too. I think that also the level of production has taken a dip. It feels almost like the fourth episode of Scorpion King, or maybe season 4, like the
Oh,
first
sure.
like 3 episodes of that show, at least looks like it. There's like kind of this Stargate SG-1 feel to it.
Yeah.
Like, I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not necessarily bad, but I mean, just like quality wise, it is harder to immerse yourself into a world when the world is presented so small. And that's, just they're doing their best. I understand that, but at a certain point, like, yeah, it's inescapable as far as like how much can I really immerse myself.
I couldn't imagine this Mathayus ending up as the Rock in the original Scorpion King, or the Mummy Returns, like
Or
this.
or even like the guy from the last movie. It
Right.
doesn't really feel like the same guy
It's the
at that
same
point.
actor, but it feels like an entirely different actor. I did find myself struggling with this one. If it wasn't for the cast here, I feel like I might have bailed out. I would have wanted to, for sure.
I'm not sitting here trying to say I love it, right? But I'm just saying, like, there were certain things kind of stringing me along, certain ideas. You're right about the Conan stuff. It becomes more of like a sci-fi thing, or tries to, I
Kind
feel,
of, yeah.
which is kind of, it's a fun direction they tried to go with. I don't ultimately think it's successful, but this is all about how like magic isn't real and it's all science based. And maybe I hate that because like I'm all about the warlords and the warlocks and the sorceresses and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it definitely takes a different direction. We'll see what else we think about it as we get there.
For sure. Let's get into the production here. I don't have a ton of notes on the actual production. As you can probably imagine, there's not really a ton of information on the making of the Scorpion King 4 available, but we will go through the credits here. So this was produced by Mike Elliott and Ogden Gavansky and directed by Mike Elliott. Ogden Gavansky is a Canadian producer who has worked on a number of direct-to-video sequels, including Tremors 5, Bloodlines, Cult of Chucky, and The Man with the Iron Fist 2.
Oh, okay. Well, so there's like 8 Tremors movies. There's a lot of Chucky stuff. So he's kind of a sequel guy.
Yeah, both of these guys are. Mike Elliott, he's an American filmmaker with over 100 producer credits under his belt. So he's predominantly a producer, but has also obviously directed a number of films. He is one of many Roger Corman disciples, it turns out. He worked as an intern for Roger Corman before becoming a vice president at Corman's Concord New Horizons. In 1995, he co-founded Capital Arts Entertainment and became a pioneer of direct-to-video sequels with titles such as Addams Family Reunion, American Pie Presents Bandcamp, and Time Cop 2: The Berlin Decision.
Oh.
He made his directorial debut with Beethoven's Big Break in 2008. And in the years since, he's produced American Pie Presents The Book of Love and American Pie Presents Girls Rules, Smokin' Aces 2, Death Race 2, 3, and Death Race Beyond Anarchy, Blue Crush 2, Kindergarten Cop 2, Bring It On Worldwide, Cheer Smack, Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell, Granddaddy Daycare, How High 2, Undercover Brother 2, and many, many more.
Get the point. But love these guys that make it their thing to do like all these sequels and threequels and series, and keeping these franchise alive for whatever reason, keeping them on life support just to keep that IP fresh at the studio, just until one day they get the bright idea or the cast and money to do a feature film again. But I love it.
Yeah, to give you the idea, the sort of guy Elliot is, he has been quoted as saying, quote, "It got to a point where we shrugged our shoulders and slowly realized theatrical was about prestige more than it was a sales factor. The box and the cast became more important," end quote.
Yeah, I get that. Like, it's all politics sometimes at the box office, and like you can just do what you want to do at home video. Like, it's just a difference.
I guess in a way, I kind of respect a guy who just wants to make movies, right? Isn't necessarily interested in making high art.
Look, as a guy who had a podcast about only the third movie in a film franchise, okay, like
Yeah.
it's all valid,
Yeah.
like that stuff needs to exist for everything else to coincide with, right? It
For
just
sure.
it belongs, and yeah, and who's to say what's art and not, and like let the guy make these movies. People are watching them, so hey,
That's true.
he's giving us content.
That's right. The screenplay was written by Michael D. Weiss. Couldn't find much about him outside of his list of credits. However, it looks like he is also a straight-to-DVD guy or straight-to-video guy, having written I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer, The Butterfly Effect 2, Hostel Part 3, Jarhead, The Siege, and Eraser Reborn. But he did have a brush with Brendan Fraser when he co-wrote Journey to the Center of the Earth.
That's a fun one. I actually quite enjoy that one and the Rock one, the Journey series.
Oh, that's right. I forgot The Rock was in
they
the
made
sequel.
2 in 3D, and they're actually quite good. But again, it's a good idea to get these sequel guys together.
Yes.
Yeah. They speak the same language,
Yeah,
right?
I took the words right out of my mouth. Again, not many production notes. All I know is Scorpion King 4 was shot entirely in Romania. According to IMDb, the original title was The Scorpion King: The Lost Throne, which has
Okay.
more of an Indiana Jones vibe, which we'll get into that as well.
Oh yeah, they cribbed from that. The end, it really hit me over the head. But I like Quest for Power because it reminds me of Superman 4 Quest for Peace.
The cast here. Okay, so
Yes.
Victor Webster plays Mathayus, the Scorpion King. We talked about him in our last episode, or last Scorpion King episode, when we talked about Scorpion King 3. So you can hear all about him in that episode, as well as his co star, Will Kemp, who plays Drazen. We saw Will last as Velkin Valerius, the werewolf brother to Kate Beckinsale's character in Van Helsing.
No way. That's wild. That's some like multiverse kind of shit where they recast you and use you in a Sony movie.
See, I see it kind of as, and we'll talk about this again with the fifth Scorpion King movie. It sort of reminds me of like the old studio system where actors were contracted to the studio. And so, like back in the 30s and 40s, when we were talking about those Universal monster movies, we would see a lot of those actors show up in little bit roles. Dwight Fry, king of them, right? I think he showed up in like 4 Frankenstein movies or something like that.
Yeah, he was in The Mummy. Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that, where they just, hey, Will Kemp's available. Let's put him in the Scorpion King movie and make him our villain.
It's also, it feels, along with the cameos, it also feels very Corman-esque.
Yeah.
Where it's like he's part of the troupe. Let's just get him back into this like cycle. Like, let's recycle him, get him back into another movie.
Exactly right. I thought he was great here. I mean, he doesn't get a whole lot to do in Van Helsing because he's just sort of the audience's introduction to the werewolf element, right? He doesn't stick around too long. But now, by this point, he had been in a couple movies. And so they're like, okay, yeah, you're going to play the villain. And man, we talk about the villains in these movies. The last one, it was Billy Zane. This time it's Will Kemp. And I mean, though he doesn't have the resume that Billy Zane had by the time he showed up in a Scorpion King movie, he's still swinging for the fences. He is so committed to this villain role.
Yeah.
I did really enjoy his performance. Some of the lines that he was given are absolutely ridiculous, but his deliveries are so committed that I kind of loved him.
I'm right there with you, actually. Like, he plays the perfect douchebag kind of character. Like, he's such an arrogant asshole, but like, it's such kind of like a weirdly endearing performance in the way that he's very Billy Zane. Yeah, like he totally is on the right level, I think, for what this movie needs. Not everybody is there with him, but thankfully as the villain, like he's chewing up every scene. It might not be the best scenery, okay, but like he's definitely working with what he's got.
I really liked him here. Okay, we got Ellen Holman as Valina, newcomer to the podcast here. She is a Detroit native and current Michigan State University record holder for the women's long jump at 7.5 feet. She got her start as an actor in 2005, making her TV debut in an episode of Malcolm in the Middle. In 2006, she made her feature film debut in Roadhouse 2. She was a series regular on Spartacus Vengeance, Spartacus War of the Damned, and Into the Badlands. And we have most recently seen her probably in The Matrix Resurrections as the character Echo.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't recognize her from anything. She's gorgeous. Her, along with Will Kemp, I was kind of like, they're very modern. They feel, if they're not doing anything of the era at all. It's just like a supermodel fell through a portal when she was a baby, kind of like the Princess Peach thing in Mushroom Land. And it's just like she was raised there and knows no difference whatsoever. And it's like, why is she like feel like she should be working at the mall? But nevertheless, totally on board, like throwing herself around, making a fool out of herself, like all that stuff for the comedy or whatever. Like, well, actually not the worst role for female we've seen along the Scorpion Kings. Actually, she's very much in the forefront leading the way. Maybe that's part of the problem. Like, I feel like Mathayus as a character overall works best when he's paired up with someone, but he's usually paired up with someone more interesting than him. And that, I think, is definitely the case here, where he feels like he's tagging along on her adventure a lot.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I think you're right. Mathayus is not a character that we see great character arcs from. It's usually everybody else surrounding him that like brings the life and the color, and she's definitely a formidable ally, and she's got great comedic timing, even though the jokes are, it's not really my flavor.
Oh, it's so PG. I can't believe there's a 13 at the end of the rating. Like, some of this feels G-rated.
Some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like she sells the hell out of some of these jokes. So I was really impressed with that. I was impressed with the physicality because she gets a couple fight scenes and she's great in them. Which brings me to the next point. She's trained in the art of jujitsu. So she has legitimate martial arts training. So that makes perfect sense.
That helps convincing me when
Yeah.
she's running around fighting. I mean, there's not a lot. This probably has the least amount of stunt and fighting and all that we've seen so far. So they
Sure.
probably did the majority of it themselves as well.
And also, she is the CEO and founder of the nonprofit Visual Impact Now, which provides children with eyeglasses. So she is a humanitarian as well. Very cool.
There's something funny about like a movie star helping people see better so they could like watch her movies.
Watch the
one
movies.
day.
We'll get into some of the big names here real quick. Barry Bostwick as Sorel Raskov. Like you mentioned before, we know him as Brad from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He had quite an interesting career outside of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was a graduate of San Diego's United States International University and NYU's graduate acting program. And he began as a performer with the group First National Nothing, which was described as, quote, a rock theater commune made up of musicians, actors, dancers, singers, designers, writers, composers, and friends that started a long, long time ago as a lost tribe in California and has ended up as a theatrical performing company in New York City, end quote.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and he was also a member of a pop band called The Clowns, spelled with a K, which was assembled by Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. He performed on stage for a bit in the 70s, but then, of course, his career-defining role came in the form of Brad Majors in the 1975 cult classic The Rocky Horror Picture Show. And in the years since, he's kept busy with a lot of smaller budget films and appearances on TV, so he is still very active.
He, again, is great in this, like very goofy. He plays sort of like a Da Vinci inventor type character. And, you know, at one point there, I think it was a reference to Rocky Horror where they like have to be disguised as women, so he puts on like a drag and then he just like wears it for half the movie. You know, he's like cool with being in drag. And I was like, I wonder if that is any kind of connotation to Rocky Horror, any of that kind of cross-dressing stuff. But like, yeah, it was good in this one.
We know from Rocky Horror that he's very funny. His comedic timing is fantastic, and he has it on full display here, for better or worse. You know, like, I'm not going to keep harping on it, but like I said, the comedy doesn't really work for me, but he's doing a great job at selling it, just as Ellen Holman does. And so, just total veteran comedic actor. Really enjoyed what he brought to this role here.
Yeah, committed again.
Michael Biehn plays King Yannick for all of 5 minutes.
But still, like, wow, that was crazy. Then every one of these, you're like, you know, the cast is wild. And I'm like, all right. And like, sure enough, like one after the other, the cast is wild. And Michael Biehn shows up with like this beard as a king. And I'm like, oh yeah, like that's pretty cool casting.
He began acting in his high school drama program before attending the University of Arizona as a theater major. His feature film debut was an uncredited bit role in the 1978 film adaptation of Grease. But we, of course, know him as Sergeant Kyle Reese in 1984's The Terminator and as Corporal Hicks in 1986's Aliens, both directed by James Cameron. Other noteworthy performances are in Tombstone and The Rock. His career took a bit of a decline in the 90s, and he struggled with alcoholism until the mid-2000s. But in recent years, he's landed some memorable roles in both The Mandalorian and The Walking Dead TV series.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he was on that show. I liked him on The Mando. Yeah, that's always good.
Rutger Hauer as King Zakor.
Crazy, like right at the beginning and right at the end. He's like, I'll take that check, sure. But I was like, wow, Roy Batty, what are you doing?
This may not be the last time we talk about Rutger Hauer on this show.
No shit.
So
all right.
Hauer is a Dutch actor who began acting on stage at the age of 11. He made his small screen debut as the lead in Paul Verhoeven's 1969 medieval drama series Floris, and then he spent the 70s largely working on Dutch and British films before finally breaking into Hollywood with 1981's Nighthawks, where he starred as the villain opposite Sylvester Stallone. The following year, he landed what is probably his most iconic role, Roy Batty in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. He also starred as the villain in 1986's The Hitcher, and very nearly starred in RoboCop, but he was deemed by his old pal Paul Verhoeven to be too large to move comfortably in the suit.
Oh, he was going to be
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I would have seen him as like one of the baddies, one of the bad guys. That would have been crazy as one of those guys. It's to see him say, bitches leave.
Yeah. That's probably the more obvious choice, although I would have enjoyed seeing him play the good guy for once.
Yeah, I just like seeing him, and you don't really see RoboCop's face a lot in that movie, so it would be great to see him. But dude, Lady Hawk, anyone Lady Hawk? No, that was a big movie in the '80s for me. It's Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Broderick. It's like a
Oh,
medieval
yeah, yeah,
tale
yeah, yeah. Oh, I remember now.
of
Yep.
like animorphs or something.
Over the years, he has become something of a cult star, appearing in a lot of low budget productions from the 90s to the present day, with appearances in larger productions such as Sin City and Batman Begins. And finally, because of their relevance to our show, Rutger Hauer played the title role in Dracula 3 Legacy, as well as Abraham Van Helsing in Dario Argento's Dracula 3D.
Okay, might get to those one day.
So, yeah, I mean, Dracula 3, it has to be on your third time's a charm.
It was scheduled for this summer, but yeah, plans changed a little bit.
Considering he did 2 Dracula movies, I definitely feel like we'll be talking about Rutger
Plus, he
Hauer.
played a Dracula in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, right? He was like the head vampire. So
Was he Dracula in that, or was he just the
well,
head
he
man?
wasn't Dracula, but he was
Okay.
like the head vampire. I forget what they called him.
M. Emmett Walsh plays Gorak.
Crazy.
Like you said, one of the most iconic character actors. He's got over 230 screen credits. He first earned a degree in business administration from Clarkson University before being encouraged to pursue acting by his faculty advisor. And so he moved to New York, attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and did about 10 years of regional theater before his 1969 Broadway debut in Does a Tiger Wear a Necktie with Al Pacino.
Oh, hooah.
After small roles in Midnight Cowboy, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and Serpico, Walsh's big break came with 1977's Slapshot. And as I mentioned, he had over 230 credits, so there's absolutely way too many to talk about, but some greatest hits include Blade Runner, Blood
Also
Simple,
Blade Runner, yeah.
Back to School, The Iron Giant, Romeo and Juliet, Knives Out. Fun fact, Roger Ebert had a Stanton-Walsh rule, which is, as I quote, no movie featuring either Harry Dean Stanton or M. Emmett Walsh in a supporting role can be altogether bad, end quote.
That sounds like a good college thesis from the movie PCU, you know?
Oh, hell yeah. And I kind of agree with Roger Ebert on that.
Yeah, he wasn't always wrong, Roger
No.
Ebert. I'm joking.
Eve Torres plays Shankara. After earning a degree in industrial and systems engineering at USC, Torres worked as a model and a dancer, working as a member of the LA Clippers Spirit dance team, as well as appearing on game shows Show Me the Money and Deal or No Deal before launching into a professional wrestling career after winning WWE's 2007 Diva Search.
Is she the one that has the diva match in this movie?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, they take a break and it's Friday night wrestling.
That's right.
Basically for a couple minutes here.
She became a 3-time WWE Divas champion before retiring in 2013 to become an instructor at the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy. She's only got 3 film credits so far. She first appeared as herself in the 2013 film Queens of the Ring, making The Scorpion King 4 her first film playing a character. Yeah, they definitely worked in a wrestling match because they had access to a professional wrestler.
I'm not complaining. I actually think that sequence works.
You know what? Considering where WWE women's wrestling was in the early 2000s, I love this as a women's wrestling match.
Yeah, there's actual moves going on. We'll get there. But like it's kind of funny because for some reason I sat through those new Zack Snyder Rebel Moon movies, and like there is a sequence very similar to this. It's a very similar type of movie where they have to go from place to place and pick up new kind of party members, and they go to like a gladiator type arena thing to pick up a dude, and like this works much better than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy that scene. We'll definitely talk about it some more in a little bit. Brandon Hardesty plays Boris, sort of like the main leader of the Kingsguard, Drazen's Kingsguard in this. Yeah, he's originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and he got his start on YouTube. So I think he's our first YouTuber using the name Artie TSMITW, an abbreviation of Artie, the strongest man in the world, taken from the 90s show The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Right.
Hardesty would reenact famous movie scenes, do impressions, as well as make weird faces and noises. One of the videos in his Strange Faces and Noises I Can Make series was used in a Geico commercial, while another was parodied on the MTV sketch show Human Giant. With the success of this channel, Hardesty launched a second channel called No Small Parts, which was a documentary series about character actors including Warwick Davis, Harry Dean Stanton, Richard Kiel, Crispin Glover, and others. In 2007, his YouTubing landed him in his first feature film role in the indie film Bart Got a Room with William H. Macy.
Oh, wow.
He also landed the lead role in American Pie Presents The Book of Love and a supporting role in Bucky Larson, Born to be a Star.
Okay. All right. He's perfectly serviceable. He's fine. He's fine. You know, if you didn't told me any of that, I would assume that like he just went to acting school like everyone else and got a gig. And yeah, it's all
Yeah,
right.
he was a YouTuber back when like you could just kind of get away with a weird shtick on YouTube,
Yeah.
like, and it would go viral just because it was strange.
Yeah. It was much smaller probably back
Yes.
then.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to like sort of like the Numa Numa dude, except he did it with intent. It was like real lo-fi, simple ideas. He's literally like reenacting film scenes by himself, multiple camera angles, doing the impressions. But yeah, it landed him a couple movie deals. So good for him. I think he's fine in here. Roger Halston plays Roland. There's not much here to say about him. I only mention him because he does play kind of an important role in the film. He's pretty much made a career out of doing low budget movies and appears to be a favorite of director Mike Elliott, having appeared in several.
Oh, is this the Axeman?
The
I know
Axeman.
this is like the prisoner guy, right? The
Yes.
guy,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then a couple small roles here before we get to our last big star. Esme Bianco plays the High Priestess Feminina. I mention her because she's a British actress, neo-burlesque performer who also played Roz in Game of Thrones. The prostitute. She was in the first like 3 seasons, I think.
Oh yeah, no wonder she looked familiar. Okay.
And then just like in the Scorpion King 3, there are multiple mixed martial artists here, including Royce Gracie, Roy Big Country Nelson, Antonio Bigfoot Silva, and Don the Dragon Wilson. So
Yeah, Don the Dragon. Damn, that's a blast from the past.
yeah, those are all the Kingsguard of our next actor. Finally, Lou Ferrigno as Gizura is the character's name. We never hear a character name, but that's what the credits will tell me. Lou Ferrigno is, of course, an actor and former professional bodybuilder. He won a Mr. America title and 2 Mr. Universe titles and appeared with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1977 documentary Pumping Iron. He suffers from hearing loss, which he believes was caused by a series of ear infections as a baby, which also resulted in a speech impediment, which he said got him bullied by kids at school. And inspired by comic book heroes the Hulk and Spider-Man, Ferrigno became, quote, obsessed with power and wanted to be strong enough so that I could be able to defend myself, end quote. So it's fitting that he went on to co-star as the Hulk in the Incredible Hulk TV series, which ran for 5 seasons from 78 to 82 and spawned 3 TV movies. He's also made cameos in the 2003 film Hulk, the 2008 film The Incredible Hulk, and has voiced the Hulk in the MCU up until 2015 when Mark Ruffalo took over in Avengers Age of Ultron. He also played Hercules in the 1983 Italian-American film Hercules.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It was good to see him. I can't believe he's in his 70s. Like the guy looks great. He's still
got it.
moving. He's huge too, man. The guy's a mountain. It's awesome. I'm so glad that he was here too. It gave me hope at the beginning here to be like, we're in Conan land. We're good. Like Lou Ferrigno's here. I'm getting the vibe. And then Rutger Hauer's like, I'm sending you north. And I'm like, cripes. There goes all that.
What's weird to me is the poster for this movie. Lou Ferrigno is the biggest person on the poster.
Yeah.
Victor Webster, who plays Mathayus, is the smallest person on the poster. The other 4 people on this poster are Royce Gracie, Roy Big Country Nelson, and Eve Torres. 4 of the actors on this poster, which has 6 characters on it, are in this movie for like a scene.
Marketing, baby.
Yeah, we got to put Lou Ferrigno as the biggest character on this poster. Then people might check it out.
They're like, well, he is the biggest human in the movie.
That's our whole cast. I mean, there's a bunch of other smaller characters. That's our principal cast. So let's get into this. A lot of plot points to get through. We'll try to breeze through this as simply as we can here.
Yep.
So this movie opens with an infiltration.
Yeah.
Mathayus and Drazen sort of con their way inside this castle. It begins with Drazen being dragged by a camel. He pretends he's been attacked by the most hideous thing out in the desert, the Scorpion King. And then Mathayus shows up and the 2 of them kick ass.
I couldn't believe what a terrible plan that was. It was like, you're going to get dragged by a horse.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to come up and beat everybody up. Like, what?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Why bother with the subterfuge? Like, I feel like just walk up, kick everybody's ass, and then get in there. This is a thing that they apparently do all the time. Because I think Drazen says something like, why do I always have to be dragged by the camel? There's a whole sequence here involving a hallway with a bunch of swinging pendulous blades.
Yeah, it's the trap, and they have to do like a dance together to sort of get through the traps, right? It ends up being like a waltz or something like like that.
Yeah, not for the first time in this movie. It's one of like 4 times in this movie. We kind of get subtle Indiana Jones vibes, like
Hmm.
a trap hallway. Through that, they find themselves in this treasure room, and what they're after is this urn, right? It's the
Yeah.
urn of kings, which, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is believed to hold the key to like incredible power. So they get in there, and it's literally Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the urn is on a pedestal, and they just swap it out with something of comparable size and weight.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it was so blatant. It was almost like they were about to pick it up and they're like, hold on, let's do the thing from that movie.
Yeah. It works out just about as well as it does for Indy, as it does for them. They get trapped under this big cage.
Yeah, the big cage falls down.
They manage to use like a hook and line to like leverage this thing up a little bit. They get into another fight with these guards who were not dead. They're just knocked unconscious.
And that's when Lou Ferrigno shows up,
Lou
right?
Ferrigno shows up. They fight him. We think he's dead, right? Like he ends up
Yeah.
underneath of a giant column. And this is where Drazen shows his hand, and we realize, oh, he's not a partner. He's going to double cross Mathayus.
Matthias has to go back into the cage to get the urn and
Right.
like hand it out, and then he gets trapped again.
With that double cross, Mathayus returns to King Zakor. This is Rutger Hauer's character, who had hired him to go retrieve that urn.
Real quick, really
Yeah.
weird. I thought he was done with this in the last movie where he moved into that new kingdom. Right?
Yes.
He took over Boba Fett's kingdom, right? And Hellboy comes to, I'm so bad with names tonight, but like Hellboy comes to him at the end and he's like, hey, thanks for taking over this, hand it over. And he's like, not so fast. I'm the Scorpion King again. And now he's doing errands again for Zakoro or whoever. And it's like, bro, have people do errands for you. You got the king in your name.
I've got 2 possible explanations for this. Now, none of which are supported by this particular movie, right?
Okay.
It's just sort of like the only way I can make this work. Either, him becoming the Scorpion King at the end of the 3rd movie is just an honorary title and he's not actually king of anything. Or this might be like a prequel.
First of all, it's like declared that that's his now at the end of the last movie. Everyone is happy and they're living in the forest and the
Right.
whole Robin Hood thing. I don't know about that, but what I started thinking about is I think this might be a sequel to the first movie. I think that's where we're going. I think it's one of those deals where it's like, forget all the other Scorpion King movies because they referenced the first movie several times.
Right.
Kind of the same story in the second movie where he's just like, my wife died.
Yeah.
Mysterious circumstances, lost my kingdom, yada, 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 and I'm thinking like, well, that's all that happened to this Scorpion King. We're on some other timeline here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think this might be a prequel, like sort of like a Temple of Doom situation where
Okay, I gotcha.
there's nothing in this movie that supports that idea. Like there's like in Temple of Doom, you at least had a date at the beginning of the movie that sort of told you, if you were paying attention, that it's set before Raiders.
At least in this one, he doesn't end up with a new kingdom or anything. So I could see this coming before part 3. Yeah.
Like, because remember in part 3, he really does not want to hear Scorpion King. Like he pretends he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Here, he's kind of still on board with that label.
Yeah, no one really buys it. They're like, that guy doesn't exist. And he's like, oh, I'm not really known around here. I gotta get the word out.
So yeah, no, I had the same thought as you. I don't think they were very concerned with where this fits in with the Scorpion King timeline. So I'm going to choose to believe chronologically this fits between the Scorpion King and the Scorpion King 3. So somewhere in there.
Oh, man. Part of me, Dan, just wishes we made it as screenwriters so that I could write a part 6 to a movie and cram in all of what like make it all fit somehow, like just bend over backwards like the Saw series to make it work.
I'm curious to see what happens with our final Scorpion King movie, Book of Souls. That's the 5th one in the series. Is he going to be like a king at the beginning of that one, or is he still going to be a mercenary? Who knows?
I have my fingers crossed for the most epic conclusion to the Scorpion King. That makes no sense whatsoever, but I want it to happen. I'll just tell you right now, I hope he ends up in New York in modern day. And then he turns around and he's in Times Square, but then he never turns into the crazy Scorpion in the Mummy Part 2. So
back to Quest for Power. Mathayus, empty-handed, returns to King Zakor. Zakor now is kind of concerned about this incredible power possibly being in the hands of enemies, but rather than attack, he zigs when everyone thinks he's going to zag, and he sends Mathayus out there with a peace treaty for King Yannick.
Yeah, he sends him to the Northlands, to Norvania. They don't want to say Norway or Transylvania, but they just combine the two. And I guess Drazen is Michael Bihn's son, and he's kind of like, Drazen's a real dick. Like, he can't get this power. His dad's more reasonable, like, go talk to his dad. And I love how Mathayus is like, I'm like a one-man army. He's like, I'm not gentle, I'm not a peace kind of dude. He's like, I'm not into that kind. And he's just like, they won't expect you, so go. They'll be caught off guard, and like, you just go and you be a nice guy.
And they totally expect him to raise some shit.
Yeah.
He not only shows up and gets into a quote-unquote fight with a bunch of the king's guards, but he basically turns himself in. There's a whole fight sequence. That's when we meet Boris.
So that's when it's a cartoon. Isn't that the fight scene where he's just like eating something while the guards are like taking each other out?
Yeah.
Kind of like around it. It's like a Rube Goldberg-esque kind of effect going on where they're trying to hit him and he just like turns around, like accidentally knocks them on the head.
Yeah.
They just like all take each other out.
Although he does get punched in the face, like directly in the face, and is completely unfazed by it, which I thought was really
It's a fun bit. That's very Superman.
Yes, very Superman. He ends up ultimately kind of turning himself in because he figures, I guess, that it's going to get him access to the king.
Yeah.
So while he's in prison, this is where we meet Valina and we meet Roland. There's like a whole thing. She tries to like sort of calm him. Yeah, I could tell you how to get to the king. You got to do this and then you got to do that. And then, you'll meet the king. So that's how we get introduced to those characters. Ultimately, Drazen comes in to get Mathayus and torture him in this device called a man kettle.
Isn't this where Valina, we find out that she is Drazen's like fiance?
Yes.
Yeah, and we find out even later, she was gonna like marry him and then like murder him and like or like kind of get rid of him and then take over with her ideas, and like her dad is supposed to be the rightful king.
Yes.
We find a lot of that stuff out later. But right now she's like, I'm in prison because I didn't agree to marry that guy. So like, he threw me in jail. I know my way around this place.
She mentions that she is of like the royal bloodline of Norvania and that her father is the rightful heir, and she was supposed to marry Drazen, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, which is why she's in prison and will be executed to be made example of in front of all the people. So that's Valina's story. Mathayus now finds himself being tortured by Drazen. He's got this like medieval torture device. He's in like a metal sarcophagus over a fire, and he's basically interrogating Mathayus. Doesn't believe that he's there offering peace. And the only thing that saves him is that he is brutally honest about how he wants to kill Drazen. And Yannick is like, okay, I believe him.
The man kettle is so bizarre. It's so weird. Like, I don't know how they came up with that as like the torture device thing. Like, why not put like a cobra on him or like venomous insects? Like, there's a lot of like creepy crawlers and things like you could steal from Indiana Jones here. I don't remember there being like a human kettle torture device.
So the man kettle is sort of a derivation of an old Greek torture device called a brazen bull, also known as a bronze bull. Folks were locked inside of this like metal bull that was situated over a fire, and it pretty much operated in the same capacity.
It cooked you.
Yes. So they redesigned it, I guess, so that we could still see Victor Webster's face the entire scene. Kind of a neat idea, but his honesty is what saves him. And Yannick, for some reason, believes that he's telling the truth and is prepared to accept peace. At the dinner table, when they're about to, break bread and agree to a peaceful situation, Yannick, as he's about to sign the paperwork, he is suddenly realized like there's scorpions all over him inside of his clothes. And Drazen is like barely concealing the fact that he set this up. He's like, oh, it's scorpions, wink.
He basically points at Mathayus. It's like, it had to be him. He's the Scorpion King. Scorpion's, 1-1, man.
Yeah.
It's him.
Fortunately, Yannick kind of understands the betrayal before he dies. Hands Mathayus we totally forgot to talk about the golden key inside the urn.
That's okay. We could talk about it now.
The urn did have a literal key that led to the Lord Alchemon throne room. In this moment, he has the wherewithal to like make sure Mathayus gets this key so that Drazen doesn't get it. For whatever reason, that key is now going to become the MacGuffin that gets passed back and forth.
Yeah, and in his like dying breaths, Michael Biehn gives it to Scorpion King. He's like, don't let my bastard son win. He's like, I like you now.
Now it's like a big extended chase sequence. There's a couple things
Yes.
happening. While all this is going down, Valina is pretending to have some kind of illness. She has like made up her face to have spots.
Oh, right.
She's being seen by like a doctor. At the same time, Matthias is trying to escape this castle. They end up sort of running into each other. And then for the rest of this sequence, they're just sort of running through the city, crashing through walls like the Kool-Aid Man.
There's definitely like guys running around on CG fire in this
Yes.
one. I don't think they quite had the budget for the flames for real. Yeah, he runs through that wall, and dude, it's so weird because it's just like, we're trapped, and he's like, no, we're not, and he just runs through
Yes.
a wall with like nothing on the other side, and they go flying, and then they catch up to him, and they just jump off the side of the castle. Like there's that gigantic 3-tiered walled
Yeah.
castle. They jump off the side, and they go like tumbling down the hill.
Easily like 50 feet.
Totally would have broken their necks and every other bone in their body. And that's when they're like shooting all the arrows at them. This is the big action sequence, I feel, you know, the one trying to compete with the previous films. But
Right.
I don't know. There's just a lack of impact.
And well, a part of it for me was some of the filmmaking technique. It felt strange to see in a fiction film when Valina and Matthias are like rolling down this hill, because they don't just jump off the wall. They jump off the wall and then roll down this very steep incline. And they're wearing like body cams. So as they roll, we're getting sort of body cam footage of them. It felt very reality TV to me.
This is going to sound weird because it's a modern movie, but I feel like the modern filmmaking techniques don't work aesthetically with the time period. If I know that sounds weird, like it could work. It just, they didn't establish that as part of the visual language with like body cam POV or any, and I don't believe they ever use it again, but it would have been cool if there was a POV fight sequence in this movie. That's something fun, you know. But I hear just saying it's jarring because it's kind of like just stuck in there. Is how it feels.
With the comedic sensibilities and shots like this, I think what I'm realizing in this moment is that the film is sort of at odds with being an old medieval-esque kind of set adventure film with a lot of neo-contemporary filmmaking sensibilities. And I don't know that they gel well enough together. They sort of stand out in a bad way a lot of times.
Yeah, I get that.
I can't just turn it off. It stands out like a sore thumb, and I'm just like, ooh, really? That's the choice they went with. Okay, sure. But yeah, it's a really wild sequence. There's way too much to cover here, but this whole chase escape sequence, insane.
Okay, like they fall down the hill, the arrows, all that, and then some guy just comes riding up, and he like just immediately takes his horse, and they get off and they run away, and then there's just a shot of them on horseback, and it's clearly ADR'd. It's like the entire exposition for the next act of the film. That, as far as like filmmaking technique, Dan, that's more of what I was expecting.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Like that, I was like, oh, that's great. They used that one shot, filled in the exposition of the ADR. Now we're on. Yeah, she's literally like, we'll go to my dad. He'll know what to do. He used to be king. He's got inventions.
Perfect segue. Now we meet Valina's dad, Sorel, who, like you've mentioned, is kind of like a Da Vinci eccentric inventor, a scholar, really not at all interested in being king of anything.
He is crazy. Not only does he have blueprints for a car and an airplane, he's like turned his cottage into like an automated cottage, but like there's no electricity. So like, what's the point? Like it's not running anything. He just ends up making a wood chopping machine in his house.
Yes.
It was so confusing. It's not like he turned it on and it made iced tea like Doc Brown in the Old West, right? Like it does nothing. It's so weird.
It is very Doc Brown, just house full of weird inventions.
But he's like, I'm going to turn on this thing. My whole house is automated, and like nothing is automated. You know, I expected a light to go on.
In reality, it would all be like Rube Goldberg devices, right? All gravity powered. But he's got, like you said, he's got a machine that can like chop wood. He's used magnets to levitate an anvil, which will come into
magnets,
play.
Bitch.
And yeah, he's got designs for automobiles and airplanes. The first time we see him, he is dressed in a big feathery bird suit, catapulting through the air, trying to fly.
Dude, Mathayus is eyeing that catapult like he's in love. Like they set that catapult up hard.
Yeah, this is a big sort of foreshadowing scene. We're going to see that catapult again. We're going to see the magnets come into play.
He's supposed to be king, like all that kind of shit.
What's cool about Sorel is that he's also very educated despite appearances. And so this key that they have that's going to lead them to Lord Alchemann's throne room. It's like got all sorts of like clues, like little riddles written across it, right? And he can sort of figure out or help them figure out what those riddles mean and eventually lead them to where they have to go.
Yeah, he's like the Riddler. Like he'll figure it out. He's good. What I want to touch base on a little more is sort of like the main theme of this movie, which is like there's no such thing as magic. It's all science. Like magic
Yes.
is just science that can't be explained. I'm like still wrestling with. I think that's a good direction. That's like a sharp turn to take the series, but we know magic exists. Like Scorpion King is magic, kind of like he's seen it with his own eyes, you know. That is why I'm kind of wrestling with it a bit, but they commit to that. Like every time you think it's magic for the rest of the movie, it's science, except at the very end when it's magic.
I wonder if the Thor movie like had any influence on this, because if memory serves, now it's been a long time since I've watched it, but if memory serves, part of that movie is the sort of realization that magic is just science that hasn't been explained yet.
Yep, it's all just science that is too advanced for humans because they're aliens and they
Right.
live longer. Yeah.
Thor's not a god. He just seems like one because of this alien technology. Right. So I think that possibly could have had some influence on the script.
Sure.
I mean, we've talked plenty about how the Universal Monsters verse has been influenced by the Marvel Cinematic Universe since its inception. So
Yeah, I think they cut out Scorpion King's boomerang hammer or axe from one of the movies because they were afraid it was too close to Thor or
Right.
something. Like, yeah, like it's come up before. They're definitely got eyes on it.
yeah, the first clue that Sorrel figures out is that the hidden palace of Lord Alchemann is somewhere in Glenrosovia, which is, I guess, a neighboring town or a town not very far away. But before they can head to Glenrosovia, Drazen and his posse arrive. They take the key and set the house on fire, leaving everyone to die.
That's terrible. All that work. That's all I kept thinking of. The poor guy, his life's work is one of those moments. And I was like, you didn't grab anything? All right, I guess it's all up here.
Armed only with the key and the knowledge that the throne is somewhere in Glenrosovia, Drazen and his men head to Glenrosovia and start terrorizing the villagers. Like, certainly one of you knows where it is, tell me, or I will kill another child. Sort of that kind of diplomacy.
Oh, yeah. Very, very Empire, like strolling into town or something. But like this town, though, felt very Ren Fair. Like
Yes.
it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
shot at a Ren Fair. And like, I get it. I just kind of felt bad at one point because I was like, I guess it would just be like that. I guess that's the problem is like nowadays rent fairs are too authentic. It's like you go to one and you're like, well, this is probably like how it would be. I guess so that when you see this period piece portrayed at this production level on TV, it just feels like I've been there.
Have you been to a Ren Fair, Mike?
Oh, yeah. I went with Larson one year. It was a lot of fun, actually. I was very immersed in that.
I've never been. I keep wanting to go and dress as like a Star Trek character. Once Mathayus and Valina and Sorel escape the fire and they do make it their way to Glenrosovia, they enlist the help of a young child. He's like a pickpocket, right? He tries to steal Mathayus's sword, but instead of chastising him, he gives him a job.
Yeah, he's great with kids.
Yeah, we've seen The Rock do the same thing in the first Scorpion King movie.
Yeah, and I think in the prequel, young Scorpion King had a little kid for some of it too. Like that's just the big thing is like Scorpion King hangs out with a little kid, a gorgeous woman, sometimes like an old man.
That's the formula.
Right? It's like that's his party, you know, and they're off doing their thing. And this town, I like the concept of sort of like the hidden temple thing. It kind of felt very like Zelda to me at some point.
Yeah, I could see
right?
that.
Like those are some more vibes that I started picking up where I'm like, I don't want to say I'm getting into the movie, but when like the sex cult shows up, I'm sticking around, you know?
So the little boy manages to like pickpocket the key from Boris, right? Boris was the man trusted with it, like defend it with your life. Little kid comes and snatches it, and they discover the next place they have to go is to this temple of the goddess where only women are allowed inside. And so naturally, the only solution is to dress Mathayus and Sorel in women's clothes.
And we get like this MIDI version of Bad to the Bone that's
Yes.
like just off.
It's like a slow motion walk, jump cuts, and like a weird rock song. So there's the joke, the obvious visual of Mathayus, a big muscly man in women's clothes, and their faces are covered with these like sheer pieces of fabric.
Like this movie is so, I don't know, juvenile, I guess.
Oh,
Like
it's
it's hard.
100%.
But it's like harmless. We find out like it's not going to be in poor taste because one character is going to stay in drag and prefer it, right? Like there's
Right.
something kind of like nice about that. It just seems so easy at one point where it's like, I can't believe they're going for the easy joke, but then they make that joke last like almost the entire movie.
Right.
So I got to say, like, the movie has like some balls for that.
Yeah, it does kind of skirt, pun intended, like adult joke territory in a few minutes, but for the most part, it's very like family friendly comedy.
Well, I was shocked when we get to like the cult of very sexy women
Yes.
that there aren't a lot of crude jokes.
There's one big one.
There's one. Yeah, maybe that's the reason. They could have gone, I feel, way further with a lot of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think they ultimately wanted to make this like something for the whole family, and so they really kind of stayed on that side of it.
Which I wonder if this is where the 13 and the PG-13 comes into play because of the revealing clothes and the double entendre and all that kind of thing.
Inside, we're introduced to High Priestess Feminina. The con that they decide to go with is that Mathayus is Valina's sister who is sick and needs help right away. And so they're going to pray to the gods, to cure her sister's illness. And like the entire time, Mathayus just can't seem to contain his masculine urges, but they do end up in this little chamber, which has a statue of a woman, like a very voluptuous woman, right? There's like a keyhole where the belly button is. And so they just sort of make their way in and immediately just say, okay, we're taking this over, stick the key into the belly button, turn, nothing happens. Mathayus makes his one adult joke. Maybe it's the wrong hole.
That's pretty good.
It is a good joke as far as jokes are concerned. I will say I did laugh. And I also love Valina's reaction to that. Perfect, on the nose, low-hanging fruit kind of comedy. So eventually it does start working. The little chamber that they're in, it's sort of like a cage. It starts to rise up off the floor and up through that ceiling.
Yeah, like an elevator.
Kind of, yeah. At the same time, Drazen has sort of figured out the key is missing and that they are in the temple. So he and his men rush in, and he's immediately telling his men to like chop that thing down. But they do make their way through the ground, and they notice there's like a stained glass window of like a castle. I think one of the clues on the key sort of indicates that they have to break that stained glass to view where they have to go next. And so they do, and there's this big rock-like structure up in the hills.
Yeah, it's like a mountain that looks like it's got a crown sitting on it. I thought that was pretty cool. We had like the Fangtooth Mountain or whatever from Dracula last week.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever he went. Isn't like, I like in Zelda, there's like always Death Mountain with the big donut cloud circling it. I'm always down for a mythical mountain. I thought that was kind of cool. The only thing that was crazy is that they get in like this elevator thing and it shoots them up through the ground and it raises them directly next to the entrance of the temple. So like if they had just kind of looked past the temple into the horizon, they'd have seen the crown mountain and they probably would have been like, I bet that's where we gotta go.
Okay, so it reminded me of that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy sticks that staff head onto the rod and then lowers it into the hole, and the sun coming through the window like tells him exactly where he has to go. It sort of reminded me of that, where like they had to go through all these different steps to get in the right circumstances to see through that glass window to see where they had to go.
I see. Like to stand in the right spot and be looking in the right direction for definitive proof to be like, oh, it has to be the place. Yeah. So it's just wild that like there's this huge mountain there with this big crown on it the whole time, and the first time we see it is now. I get it. It's the movie. But it's kind of speaks to how kind of shoddy, and I'm just saying like production wise
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
story wise, like the tightness of it. This is sort of where it fails a lot of the time in these types of movies, is like it's very convenient. If they had known about King Crown Mountain from the beginning of the movie, obviously that's where the alchemy lord is buried, you know, like where else would he be buried? Clearly, like that would be part of the legend. Like Lord Alchemist is buried at King Crown Mountain. Like, just let's get there. Like, we got the key, we know, you know, but whatever.
Right.
I'm
No,
not in the movie.
nobody talks about King Crown Mountain down in Glen Rosovia. There, and you know what? Even if they did suspect something, as we're about to learn, people are afraid of the journey to get there. You know, like who knows what's up there?
There's something kind of cool about the concept of hiding science with myth. The whole idea is like, we don't want him to get this technology. So in order to do that, let's like create this idea that it's magic protecting it. Fight a dragon, and you got to go through a haunted forest and all this kind of shit.
It just occurred to me that this whole plot is the same as the final season of Star Trek Discovery. Following clues all across the universe in like ancient lore to find this incredible species creating technology. It's like the most wild, important discovery anyone's ever made. Okay, so now they know where they have to go, but they're not thrilled because they have to travel through Tugarin Forest, which legend says hidden up in that forest is a dragon that's guarding the mountain.
Among other things, yeah.
First, they need to get a map so that they can safely traverse the forest. And so, in order to get the map, they have to go get one from Gorak, M. Emmett Walsh.
This feels like it's out of the new Star Wars TV series or something. Like this feels, for some reason, it feels so Star Wars to me.
Like Tatooine, yep.
Even though it takes place like presumably on Earth hundreds of years ago. But M. Emmett Walsh to me is playing like a live action Jabba the Hutt. Like this is what they were going for before they replaced him with CGI and cut out the scene. Like this is definitely the vibe I'm getting.
Man, to see M. Emmett Walsh play Jabba the Hutt, I would pay for that.
You're kind of watching it. You know, he's got the eye patch. He's like gross like Danny DeVito and Always Sunny. Like he's just slovenly. He's got all the babes around him.
Like we've said before about other actors in this movie, he's committed to the role and he does legitimately seem to be having fun. This is like a real actor who's done incredibly impressive work in other movies. I feel like here he's just like, whatever, I could just be M. Emmett Walsh.
That's what character acting is, man. You know, you 100%. Get into the role. It's about the character, okay? And he brought Gorak to life.
Absolutely.
I don't care what anyone says.
Basically, he agrees to hand over the map on the condition that Valina fights Shankara for it. She has to win in a fight to the death.
Good fight.
Yes, it is a pretty fantastic fight.
Really well shot, clean, good choreography, good wrestling, like actual wrestling moves. Has like the balance of a wrestling match, you know, the ups and downs and all that.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy this fight. I will say those were some really tough hits, and Valina looks pretty good after that fight.
Why didn't they take Eva Torres with them? They end up taking the traitor. The other guy becomes a traitor too. The dude they were there to meet was the guy who was also in prison with them.
Roland,
back earlier. Yeah. And I called him Axeman. I think he had the axe and stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But I thought that guy was all right too. I was expecting him to last longer.
He's the go-between to introduce them to Gorak, right? And so he ends up joining them. Once Valina wins the fight, they get the map. Roland joins the crew and they make their way into Tugarin Forest,
which has the coolest entrance, which is also, it's so bizarre because like it's a forest. Like you could go around this entrance that they built, but there's like this really scary skull face entrance way to like properly enter the forest if you wanted to, kind of situation. Like we only get it for like a second or two, but I thought that was really cool. Like that's fun production.
Yeah,
you know, but it also makes no sense because you could just walk around the entrance if you wanted to.
It's a good production choice, but not most practical, yeah. While they are in the forest, well, I should mention that Drazen knows where they're headed, and so after they've entered, they're about, I think they say a half day's head start ahead of Drazen. So that's kind of how far apart they are.
They have the campfire talk when they get into the forest early on before any kind of action happens. And he explained, they had like, why do they call you Scorpion King? And he does the whole thing where he's like, oh, I was bitten by a scorpion and the blood stayed in me and shot a guy with an arrow. He thought he could catch it. And I was also on a catapult. And then like he basically recaps the first movie.
Yeah.
Which I thought was cool. I was like, oh, I think this is the proper sequel.
Right. And also, for those who may be just starting in this fourth movie, in case you forgot, this is the Scorpion King origin story scene. They are about to like settle down, but they hear some noises and they are captured by this, like, I'm going to call them a pygmy tribe because that's how Wikipedia describes them. But they are basically a tribe of like little people.
I had more Zelda on the mind. I thought they were like Skull Kids because they had those creepy masks on at first, but they're not just children. Like they're adults, but they're little people as well. Yeah. So it's a very Ewok vibe going on.
I was just about to say it basically Ewoks if they weren't in costume.
A bunch of shaved Ewoks. We're dealing with here.
I mean, the scene doesn't go that long. Basically, they're tied to stakes and they're about to like get killed by these enormous, terrifying spiders.
Good CGI on those spiders.
Not bad CGI. I would say the CGI,
the whole budget right there.
Across the board, the CGI is kind of hit or miss. Some scenes are really good, some okay. But the spiders look really good, probably because the scene was at night and you can hide a lot of the crimes that way. What kills me is that these spiders, they were defeated, quote unquote, by a giant, large scream by Mathayus.
I got a theory that I don't think they had time to develop or write into the rest of the movie. So the spiders are crawling on them and Mathayus lets out like a roar and they back off. Okay. I think the concept is like he just scared them away, but I think he controlled them with his mind. Someone even says like you talk to them or some shit. And I thought the powers of the Scorpion King were going to start being like, oh, I've got insect blood in me so I can talk to animals, or I could at least talk to creepy crawlers. So like he told the spiders to get off them.
I believe scorpions are also arachnids.
He should have said to the scorpions in the beginning not to kill Michael Biehn too.
Yeah, so scorpions are a type of arachnid, just like spiders are. They never, ever established this, but maybe that's kind of what Mathayus can do. Maybe he does have some kind of power over spiders and scorpions.
They should have established that's a cool power to be like literally like Ant-Man, right? You said it, I think, before, and maybe that was in the Dracula episode. We referenced Ant-Man with the bats and how he controlled bats. But like, I don't see why Scorpion King can't be Scorpion Man and control insects and all that kind of thing. And like, that's very cool. I thought that'd be fun. So, but no, they'd never leverage that for the rest of the movies. It would have been great if they had like they were tied up by ropes and he called in the ants to like bite his ropes, or the scorpions to bite the ropes and things. And then he's like, wow, I'm Dr. Dolittle now.
No, that's a missed opportunity for sure. I think that would have been really fun. But no, we just get this one sequence. They like sort of win over the pygmy tribe. They get into like a whole belching contest, which is kind of goofy.
Sorrel doesn't take the dress off. He's like, oh,
no, he's wearing that dress, I think, until the end of the movie. After this scene, they make their way up towards the mountain. I think the tribe warns them of this dragon.
Oh yeah, they have like the burp off and all that, and they become part of the tribe and everything. Yeah, and then dragon pass. Now this is actually where the budget went. This dragon is pretty impressive. I was pretty pleased.
I'm okay with the bait and switch, the reveal that this isn't a real dragon. It's a mechanical dragon that was built to defend Lord Alcuin's throne room. But I think a lot of that is undercut by the slapstickiness of being catapulted, like catapulting Mathayus first into the cliffside and then onto the dragon itself.
But then second time's a charm. What? That's not the saying. I agree. We just needed the one catapult because the catapult is the weirdest callback. He used the catapult in the first movie to escape from the harem ladies, I think. There was a catapult involved in the first movie. So I feel like that's what ties this even closer to being a sequel, is they wanted to involve this catapult again. It's like part of his thing, like he's known for it or whatever, but he's not. it goes on too long. Like, it's sort of goofy enough just to do it once. But I do like the conceit about the dragon. The dragon is really well done here. There are lots of the fire, and it's built into the mountain walls and all that. And that's set up like that kind of stuff with, I guess that's what the dad's house was all about.
Mhm.
But this whole idea that you can build a machine out of like wood and metal back then has been sort of established. So I was cool with the dragon.
Yeah, definitely. So once they make their way past the dragon, they find themselves outside of this crown-shaped rock structure.
Yeah, this feels like very creepy Lord of the Ringsy kind of, like there's a Stonehenge and then like a big vault door or something like that.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of the Mines of Moria a little bit.
I liked it that suddenly, like, it was almost like base camp where everything on the mountain was just like flat.
Yeah.
And then the wall of the mountain was like the giant door. Again, a lot of like, I'm sure a lot of the production art was like way awesome and they were just able to pull off the minimum. But conceptually, I think they were going in the right direction.
There's like a rock little platform that has a perfect keyhole shape in it. And so they just use the key and the throne room opens up and it becomes like really sci-fi in there.
Dude, it's the Batcave.
It is the Batcave.
There's like multiple suits of different types of armor.
Mhm.
There's like vehicles, weapons, like plants. Like, I'm actually pretty impressed.
Yeah, but like we're gonna find out over the course of this scene that a lot of it is like science-y stuff. Like they use magnets.
Oh, it's all science. That's the gimmick this time around. There is no magic, but there is a magic crown.
Crown is magic, yes.
Okay, that's kind of a fumble. The movie gets right up to the end, like sticking to its guns, and then it
Mhm.
says no, where they could have easily made this crown science as well. Like, they come kind of weird ice tech that froze the guy. It just feels like at the last minute they backed away.
Yeah. I think that it's a weird inconsistency with everything else leading up to it. But then, like at the end of the day, this is a fantasy series, so like I think maybe they wanted to tack on this one thing to keep the hope alive that there's still magic somewhere.
I'm cool with that because I was hoping they might fight like a minotaur again or something like that this movie, but that never happened. There are no monsters or creatures or anything like that, so I was a little bummed about that.
Like as soon as they go in, Roland kind of reveals himself to be a traitor. He's actually secretly working for Drazen, and so as soon as they come into the throne room, he allows Drazen and his men to come in. Then there's like some fight sequences.
Drazen puts on the magnet armor.
Yes.
And starts flying around, and that, again, not bad for where we're at this point in the movie.
Sorrel like has the realization that there are just magnets that are causing him to float in the air, and so he sort of pushes Drazen into a wall, and then he falls on the ground outside of that magnetic influence.
The area,
and reveals that it's just magnets. Mathayus manages to get a suit of armor on. They fight, and he basically Hulk smashes Drazen.
Oh, that's right.
He straight up Loki's him, just smacks him up and down.
That was great. Not only do we get Lou Ferrigno reference Hulk in the beginning, but it is shot for shot, or it is that one shot. He grabs him by the leg and he swings him like 5 times like a rag doll. And I wrote down Loki as well. Wow. Yeah. So they're definitely watching those movies, Dan.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Drazen, I know, sends a couple of his guys into this one room that has like a crown on it. It's full of treasure, but that's a trap that kills them instantly.
Dude, the best death in the whole movie is Boris.
Oh, yeah. His hasn't come up yet.
I know, but it's the best, so we'll hold it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after these guys die, I think Mathayus has the realization he has to go through the stained glass up on the wall. It's like a stained glass image.
Oh, yeah, he's got to do like a YOLO jump.
So he goes through the glass, down into this hallway, and then it's like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He can only step on certain tiles, otherwise he's going to die.
It's another chamber back there. Like, the movie's still going.
Yeah,
still
going.
So shocked.
Still going. So it's another like trap hallway, and when you step on the wrong tile, he tests one of them. Like a bunch of these spears come out of the wall.
It's just like the beginning. The beginning of the movie starts with a trap hallway, and it ends with a trap hallway.
That's exactly right. he figures out he has to step on a gold and silver tile at the same time or something like that. And so he just kind of has to hopscotch his way through this room. And then when it's Drazen and his guy's turn, he sends Boris through. He gets impaled immediately.
That is comic timing. Like
Yeah.
that was a perfect beat. Like I laughed so hard because this character, he's the number 2. You know, he's this guy, he's Drazen's number 2. He's in charge and like he's very competent throughout the whole movie. And it's like the goofy, it's like he did not deserve that. It was so funny.
I love Drazen turning to the next guy and say, well, you're the next guy in charge. And he's like, I'm more of a follower.
That's even better. The actor who's playing, this YouTube guy who's playing Boris is selling it, like has this look on his face like, I thought we were cool. And he's basically like, all right, next body to die for me, please. That was pretty hilarious. Yeah, good one there. Like genuine laugh from me. Then they come into like the actual crown room.
We forgot a detail. Let's
okay.
address it before we move too much farther. Before Mathayus launches himself through the glass, Sorrel is like mortally wounded in the throne room.
Just like Henry Jones Sr. at the end of last year. It's exactly that same scenario where instead this is the crown. They have to get the crown so they could heal the dad instead of getting the cup so that they could heal the dad.
Apologize for missing that detail. But okay, so now Mathayus is in this final chamber with the crown. He and Drazen kind of fight some more for it.
They each like put on the crown.
Drazen puts it on.
Yeah, expecting like crazy powers. And he kind of looks like, I don't know if you watch Dragon Ball Z or anything like that, but he looks like he's going Super Saiyan Ultra Instinct with like, usually they go gold colored hair, but sometimes it turns blue and it gets really tall and spiky. And he kind of looked like one of those anime characters.
Mathayus puts the crown on. At one point he is engulfed in fire, but he doesn't burn. But then Drazen overpowers him, takes the crown, puts it on himself.
Yeah.
And before he can really do much, he is turned to ice.
That's right. There was that stupid riddle where something about like, if you're worthy or something or other, you'll turn to fire. It was the Song of Ice and Fire.
It was the Thor poem, and he wasn't worthy to wear the crown.
But it was also like we're watching Thor, we're watching Game of Thrones. Like all these things are stuck in our head as we're writing this script. Like Ice and Fire came out.
Drazen is completely frozen from head to toe, and Mathayus like shatters him with his sword, takes the crown and puts it on Sorrel's head, which heals him and restores him to life. And this is the moment at which Sorrel now realizes that magic does indeed exist.
And they leave the vault or like the Bat Cave with just littered with dead bodies.
Oh yeah.
And like there's a shot, sort of like a wide shot from the floor showing the bodies as they leave, and I'm just like, that is grim. Like next person to show up, there's just be a bunch of skeletons being like, what the hell happened here last time? I think they should have like crumbled the mountain so no one could have gotten back in, like blow it up or something. There should have been a self-destruct button.
Sure. Instead, they decide they're going to leave. They leave the crown there. They throw the key back in as they shut the door, believing that it is best that nobody ever gets their hands on this power.
But honestly, there wasn't much to use. You can't use the magnet suits outside of the cave because that's how it's set up for them. You have to have the magnets. Yeah, right? Like you can't just put that on in the forest and start levitating, right?
Yeah, I chose to believe that the crown possessed more power than just a healing factor.
Crown's a different story. Like they definitely should have brought the crown with them, but there's not much else they could have really used outside of the cave. Is what I'm saying. Like all the technology like is useless, really.
Right. But I think keeping the crown locked away for no one to access is more the point.
Yes. But they also, since he was worthy, he could have taken the crown and they could have like probably healed lands and passed judgment and all kinds of. But I get it. They don't need it. They don't need it because there's no contenders anymore. Like Sorrel can just be like, yeah, I'm king now because there aren't any other kings in Norwayvania.
So Sorrel is crowned. Everybody is at the coronation ceremony. King Zakur is kind of there. I guess this kingdom is, well, now they're allies again.
Yeah, because he's more southern, Zakura. Yeah. But what is Lou Ferrigno doing there?
I don't know.
But for some reason, Lou Ferrigno shows up after having his vase and key stolen at the beginning of the movie. He's made amends.
It's sort of like a play where it's like the curtain call and everybody gets to come out.
It feels like it too. It feels like the meal they're eating is also the rap meal in like real life, like they're filming the rap party.
At Sorrel's coronation, he decides he just does not want to be king, but he gives his crown to Valina, who promises that she's going to build a kingdom that is based on science and reason and, quote, a little bit of magic.
They should have ended it with like a very like, do you believe in magic?
It was probably like this close from that being the last song.
There's also mid-credits sequence. Yeah, so the movie ain't quite over. It doesn't let you know that there's a mid-credit sequence, but I was like, I better fast forward through some of this just to be sure.
Mathayus is relieved of his service to King Zakor. He basically joins up with Valina. They kiss. So
And it's presumed that maybe he is now going to be king and she'll be queen or something like
Or
that.
however
he's
that
he's
works
at
out.
least king consort or whatever they call it, regent or something. Like
regent.
maybe not officially, but like she's in charge, but he's there too.
Right.
I mean, he is already a king.
That's true.
What the hell is he doing staying up north where he has to get down back to the desert and eventually, like, he's got one movie left, Dan.
He's got one.
He's cutting it close.
And I can't wait to see where it goes from here. That is the end of Scorpion King 4, Quest for Power. We've got one more. It's not coming up yet. I think we have one or two in between. So we will have to wait to find out what happens to Mathayus. Yes, 2 more episodes. So we'll do the Mummy next, and then Scorpion King Book of Souls will be our October episode.
All right.
Do you have any final thoughts?
These Scorpion King movies, for what they are fine. All right. Like, they're definitely like getting worse, but I can't blame them. People are kind of forcing these movies to be made. They're giving people jobs.
Mm-hmm.
The casts are great. Like, that by far has been the caveat along the way, is just seeing these faces pop up, doing their things, chewing up scenery, all that kind of stuff. I'm still into the genre. Like, I like the sword and sandal stuff, even though we're veering away from it a little bit here. I'm not going to sit here and say these are good movies or that I even like them a lot. There's something about them that are just like, they're fun. They're fine. Like, I enjoy watching them to talk to you about them. These conversations have been a lot of fun to talk about these movies. Like, you could tell, like, I'm having fun talking about them. I'm having some fun watching them. I mean, it's not always easy, as it were, but yeah. It could be a hell of a lot worse, Dan. Like, I was actually expecting a lot worse at this point,
Yeah, I will say that they are fun to watch to a degree. Where I'm a little bit disappointed most is they kind of lack an enthusiasm for the material. Like, they feel like cash grabs. And so it's not like they're like, hey, we're going to do the Scorpion King and it's going to be awesome. It's more like, hey, let's do another Scorpion King. End of sentence. And so like the heart behind the material doesn't really seem to be beating as much as I would like it to be, because we do this show because we love this stuff, and it doesn't seem like that love is being reciprocated from the back end.
Yeah, any of that comes through is unintentional. Their bottom line is to make a buck.
Yeah.
You can tell they're not really concerned about quality. They just want a finished movie that they can release, and so just like, if any of that ends up playing well, then that's just a bonus. I feel like you're right. Like, it's all about the back end with this kind of stuff, but not for us, So I wish they took a little more seriously, for sure. I'd rather have them than not have them.
Well, I think that will wrap us up for this one. Mike and I will be back on Friday, September 27th to discuss the kickoff to the Dark Universe 2017's The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise and Sofia Boutella.
Hell yeah.
Don't forget to keep an eye out for the Dark Universe series over on the Development Hell podcast in the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned at the top of the show, those episodes should be released weekly once they start, but definitely subscribe to the Development Hell podcast to stay in the loop. Keep an eye on our social media as well, and then that way you'll never miss an episode. With that in mind, follow us on X, aka Twitter, at MonsterMadePod. We're also on Blue Sky at MonsterMadePod, and on Instagram and Facebook at The Monsters That Made Us. And you can follow me pretty much everywhere online at Dan Cologne. Mike, where can listeners find you?
You can also follow me online at _Mikester, MIKESTIR, and all the other shows I'm on at thecageclub.me.
And if you want to email the show, we love hearing from you. You can email us at themonstersthatmadeus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support the show, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/themonstersthatmadeus. You can also support the show by giving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. And we can't forget about our t-shirts on TeePublic. You can find a link for that in our aforementioned Twitter and Instagram bios. For all other things Cage Club related, just head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. Stay spooky, everybody.